Dear all, welcome to this by now 30th lecture in the series of the Rosquith lectures. So we have maybe something to celebrate. We have to celebrate that there are a lot of people here, although we were a bit afraid of the attendance because of the electricity cuts in Ukraine going on at the moment. So let's hope all our connections are steady. We are also broadcasting partly from Ukraine, and our dear translator is in Ukraine. So let's hope everything keeps going and keeps working, because I think we have very interesting guests, and I thank you very much for being here, Michal Matlon and Gala Korniyenko. The first of a practical thing, you can choose your language, because everything we say will be translated directly by Elena Noviadova, you see on the screen. To do so, you have to go to the bottom of your screen. You find a globe, or you find ... and after the dot you will find your globe. From the globe, you choose Ukrainian or English in the language you prefer to hear the lecture. That is also recorded and will be put on YouTube later on for further reference, or for friends or colleagues that you want to point out the lecture to. One more practical thing is you can ask questions after both presentations, and you can do that in the Q&A. So not use the chat for that, but preferably the Q&A. And also there you can use both language, because Oksana, who is behind the Rosquith logo, will help in translating it, and we will answer the questions either in Ukrainian or in English, as you prefer. So without much further words from my side, I would like to introduce first our first speaker, which is Michal Matlon. He is an architectural psychologist working on environments that support people's well-being and productivity. It's architectural psychologist. I repeat the word because it's really not a common profession, I think, that you have, Michal. It's quite special, and I think extremely important to have that in all kind of environments. You were working in rather large-scale environments and much smaller scale environments, but from whole districts to smaller buildings. Very important in general, but maybe in the context of Ukraine even more so. So we're excited to have you, and I give first the floor to you.
Thank you very much for the introduction, and thank you for inviting me. I'm very happy to be here. So yeah, my name is Michal Matlon. I come from Bratislava in Slovakia, so just one country away. And yeah, I work as an architectural psychologist. I will share my screen. Okay. And you should see it full screen. Is that so?
Yes, it's perfect. Thank you.
Okay. And what I wanted to talk to you about today is called biophilic design, which is an approach in designing architecture, urban spaces, or interiors, which incorporate principles from the natural environment, which is backed by evidence. And shortly about me, I studied applied psychology. I finished about 10 years ago, and since then I've worked at a large-scale real estate development company where I was a part of a team called User Experience, where we were kind of a group made of architects, psychologists, sociologists, user experience and data analyst experts. And we were tasked with collecting as much knowledge as possible from current scientific evidence and studies about how spaces affect people and how to possibly create them so that they are better, so that they are work for our well-being, for our productivity, for our community, creativity, for our health, whether physical and mental. And we were supposed to translate this knowledge into practice for architects, for designers, for project managers, people who are executing the projects. And this is what we have been doing there. Then I worked at the Living Core, which is an Austrian consultancy in Vienna, which is founded by cognitive scientists from the University of Vienna. And we also worked with spaces and primarily how they can support transformation, whether in communities, in cities, in organizations and companies, and how they can support some innovation and innovative behavior and changes. About 5 years ago, I also co-founded the Venetian Letter, which was an educational project, a newsletter, together with Polish neuroscientist and Dr. Natalia Olszewska. And there we published about 70 articles and interviews with architects, with scientists, where we talked about architecture and urbanism oriented towards people and their well-being, and based on scientific evidence and empathetic approach. So this is shortly about me. So today's event is positioned kind of around the topics of environment, good for the brain. Biophilic design is really something that is applicable quite universally. So whatever is biophilic seems to be good both for neurotypical people and for neurodiverse people. And I will leave the space to focus on neurodiverse people for the second half of the event, and I will give an introduction to biophilic design, which is a little bit more universal, but I did a little bit of overview myself of how biophilic design and nature exposure benefits neurodiverse people, so I will just mention these from time to time. And I would like to start with a little story. At the beginning of the 1980s, a professor of architecture called Roger Ulrich did a study in one of Pennsylvania's hospitals. And in this hospital, there were 2 rooms where patients were recovering from gallbladder surgery. And the only difference between those 2 rooms, which were near each other, were that one of them had a view of a nearby park, and the other just saw or faced the wall of the hospital outside. And the researchers started in the late 70s to collect all kinds of data about these patients recovering in these rooms. And at the end of the study, they analyzed all the data, and they were looking for differences which could come only from the difference between whether people were recovering in the room with the natural view or with the one that didn't have the natural view. And what they concluded is that people who recovered in the room with the natural view, they had about 1 day shorter recovery. So back then, the recovery, I think, was about 7 days. And the people in the room with natural view had about 6 days recovery. They also had about 70% fewer complaints towards the staff, and also consumed about 50% less pain medication, which is a huge difference. And it seems, based on the data analysis, that it all came from the difference between the views that the patients had. And since then, this study kind of created a basis, or maybe a start, for something which we today called biophilia or biophilic design. And as you can see from the date of the publishing of the study in 1984, the popularity of this term in literature and on the internet rose quite significantly. And today there's beginning to be quite a big interest in the architectural, urbanist, and interior design industry in how to use this biophilia and biophilic design to benefit people. And what is biophilia is basically biophilic design studies how nature and exposure to nature in all its different forms benefits people, and how to use the specific elements and qualities and characteristics of the natural environment, what we see in nature, what we hear, what we can smell, what we can touch, and so on, and how to translate it into architecture and environments created by people so that they have this positive effect. And the issue is that, one of the premises is that today we spend about 90% of time inside. So while biophilic design can be applied to all kinds of environments, whether that's public spaces or buildings, facades, it's very important to also consider how it can be implemented into interior design. And while we spend this 90% of time inside, specifically, in the Western culture, we are also not very happy. We can see this specifically citizens, even in peaceful countries, who reside in cities and urban environments, they have a significantly higher, I think about 30 to 40% higher chances of suffering from depression, from anxiety, and about double the chance of suffering from schizophrenia. And of course, these differences are not purely due to the environment, because cities are very stressful environments for our primal hunter-gatherer brain that evolved over a million years of nature through many things, like just meeting hundreds or maybe thousands of people on the street, depends on how much you walk, is stressful to our brain, because it has to always watch out for whether the person who is approaching us is a threat or a friend. And it's doing it hundreds of times a day, which was not really common when we were hunter-gatherers living in African savannas, where basically everyone we met every day was our friends, and we knew them. So cities are really stressful, and our today's lives are stressful. And for Ukraine, I think it's clear that the stress levels are probably through the roof, so to say. And so any design considerations or anything that we can do through design and architecture to reduce stress, I think, is critical in today's age. What does the research say about how biophilic design can actually help us and benefit us? So the first one, as I mentioned, is stress reduction. And here I would like to also highlight that, at least from the overview that I did recently, is that this benefits also neurodiverse people. Because the environment in which neurodiverse people today, the same environment as us, have to live, is often much stressful to them than to neurotypical people. And so exposure to nature and natural elements, which by themselves are stress reducing, can help them handle the cognitive demands of everyday life much better. Biophilic design can also improve cognitive performance and attention. This is, the same effect was found for adults when they are doing work at their jobs. The same goes for children whose attention improves when they are spending their breaks in a natural environment. It was shown to increase creativity, levels of creativity, especially after prolonged exposure to nature and natural elements. It has a tendency to lift up our moods, and it can even increase the probability that people will find such an environment beautiful if it is designed according to the principles of biophilic design. Because what research in aesthetics and neuroaesthetics today shows is that the highest overlap in judgment of beauty, so that means whether people can agree on what is beautiful, is with nature. So a beautiful natural scene will most probably be beautiful to most people who look at it, compared to, for example, objects that are man-made. Here's just a short kind of visual overview. You don't have to read it. It comes from a beautiful report called 14 Patterns of Biophilic Design by Bill Browning and his team. I just wanted to show that currently there are about 150 scientific studies which support the different positive effects of biophilic design, as you can see in the columns on stress reduction, cognitive performance, and emotion and mood. So we have quite solid evidence that there really is something about this positive effect of nature and of its characteristics when we bring it into design. The reason, or our current explanation for why we can see these effects comes basically from our evolutionary history. So we have been evolving in nature for millions of years, and our brains and our bodies were kind of sculpted by the evolutionary process to be really well optimized for functioning in nature, for understanding nature. And so if we are torn away from the natural environment into like an urban environment that we have today, our brain starts to suffer because it has to spend much more energy on understanding and orienting itself in this environment and looking for threats. And all the energy spent increases stress, right? Because stress is the reaction of the human body to demands of the environment, for example. So basically, this is also why being in nature and in man-made natural environments or with biophilic environments with biophilic characteristics can have those positive effects. We are basically bringing our brains into familiar environments for which they were evolved to function well in. There are some explanations or theories for why natural environments can be so restorative, and there are three kind of elements to that. It's not that only one of them is probably true, it's that there's something to each of them. The first one is called attention restoration or attention restoration theory, where we can see that people who spend time in nature, their brain, while they are in nature, shifts to so-called undirected attention mode. When we are at work, when we are walking on the city street, doing our everyday stuff, our brain is very much in the directed attention mode where we really have to focus on doing something or avoiding threats or executing a task. But attention restoration theory says that when we are in nature, our brain kind of switches from this directed attention to a very wide attentional mode where we are kind of they call it softly fascinated by the environment, and we are just kind of switching the attention to different elements. And this is a state where our attention is regenerated. And here I would also note the possible relevance for people with ADHD, for example, who might have issues with this executive functioning and with sustaining attention. And so frequent recharge of this, to simplify, attentional battery through exposure to natural elements can benefit them. Another way is stress reduction. As I mentioned, when the brain is in a familiar environment, it just the cognitive demands, the energy it has to spend in nature and natural environments is lower, so it reduces our stress. And then there's this thing called perceptual fluency. To give you an example, when you look at a tree, the tree is a very complex thing. There's a lot of detail, there's a lot of stuff moving, but somehow it doesn't have the same negative effect on us as if we were looking at a wall plastered with advertising, which is kind of this visual smog. So both of them are very complex visual stimuli, the tree and the wall with a lot of advertising, but our brain is very fluent in perceiving the natural stimuli, because while they are very complicated, they are also organized around, for example, fractal geometry or symmetry. And these are kind of shortcuts that our brain can use to understand this environment, and so it has to spend much less energy on doing so. So this is a kind of an explanation for the restorative powers of nature. Here's just like a visual example where kind of on the left hand you have a view of the trees from the ground up. On the second picture, there's an image from a church probably, or some traditional building, where we have kind of replicated on the ceiling this kind of natural view. And on the right side, we have as a collection of or a very simple repetitive pattern, which might be more used in today's design and architecture instead. And there was just recently a study from Cleo Valentine, a researcher from the Cambridge University, who showed that such simple repetitive patterns, as with the picture on the right, are highly stressful to the brain because they overload our visual sensory centers in the brain. And so the architectural version in the middle is an example of a biophilic pattern, one of the many. So this is kind of how we can get design closer to the conditions that we would be meeting in nature, but we will also look at some other patterns that we can use, which are much more common today. So basically, when we look at the natural environments, what I wanted to show at this picture, this is a picture of an African jungle. It's not just, for example, greenery, right? Because of course we have plants, greenery, leaves, trees in nature, but there's also many other things which we can see, hear, feel. For example, here we can see the water, but we can also touch the water, we can hear the water, we can hear the birds chirping probably, but we can also walk around the space and feel different places with different kind of heat signatures, where somewhere where we are standing on the spot of light coming from the sun, we feel warm in the shade, we feel calm. There's this very much like a diversity of different sensations that we can experience in such an environment. And this is all part of the positive effect of nature and of biophilic design. Here's another example from the African savanna, where in addition to the many elements that we saw on the picture before, we can also see different changes in the terrain, right? There's this hill where we can go and climb up, and we can have a nice view of what's happening around. Or we have these little bushes or trees where we can hide and have a bit more privacy and be protected from predators. These are all characteristics of natural environment that biophilic design then utilizes to create a man-made environment, which is good for our body and for our brain. So the task is to take our brain and put it into an environment which is not foreign, which doesn't require much energy spent on understanding it, and putting it into an environment which is very familiar to it. What does it mean in practice? There are currently actually 15 patterns of biophilic design. There is one more added here, but we will talk about some of them because we don't have time to go through all of them. But as I mentioned, you can go to this report, 14 Patterns of Biophilic Design. I really like to draw on it, and there everything is very, very nicely explained. There are kind of patterns of biophilic design which are about implementing different forms of nature into the built environment, whether that's visual connection with nature, there are non-rhythmic sensory stimuli, there's presence of water, or dynamic light. Then we have kind of a more abstract level where we are talking about using the geometry that we find in nature. As I mentioned, fractal patterns, for example. There are even separate studies today which show that just looking at fractal patterns can decrease our stress levels because it, again, puts our brain or gives our brain the stimuli that it's very familiar with from nature. It's about materials, using natural materials. There's a lot of research about positive effects of wood. And then we have this third category on the right, which is more about what I showed in the picture of the African savanna, working with the different space typologies or even topologies of space. So using differences in height, putting people in more protected spaces, and so on and so on. So let's look at a few of specific patterns of biophilic design and how you can apply them in practice. Again, there might be some more examples here from interiors, but as I said, these are very universal principles that you can use in designing a building's facade, designing a public space, and any type of space, basically, which is designed for humans and it should support their well-being. So the first pattern is visual connection to nature. This can translate through having natural views. As we saw in the study at the beginning, having a natural view from the hospital bed could be very beneficial. Using plants, that's very often, a very simple and even cheap alternative to improving any kinds of space. There's research showing that even images of nature, like pictures on the wall, can be beneficial in places where we cannot afford or it's not technically possible to have plants or other kinds of nature, like in a hospital. For example, if there's a waiting room which doesn't have a window or a corridor, pictures of plants, or a shelter, for example, could be very beneficial. The same goes for doing interior landscape or including water features. Non-rhythmic sensory stimuli, it's a very interesting part of biophilic design because when you noticed, human-made stimuli are very often, rhythmic. It's the ticking of the clock, for example. But in nature, we find mostly non-rhythmic sensory stimuli. We find stimuli, whether that's visually, things we see, or things we hear, which don't have a predictable pattern to it. Or an exact predictable pattern. And it was shown that introducing these non-rhythmic sensory stimuli into our environment can have these positive effects that we talked about in the beginning. So these can be some elements like curtains that move in the wind, for example, or light reflecting from water. These patterns when you're in the bathtub and there's a light bulb shining into the water and you can see these patterns on the wall. That's exactly it. Or is a simulation of what happens when light comes through the branches of the tree, and so it creates this dotted light. And on the image in the lower right, you can see that achieved through a building's facade or a railing on the balcony. So we can of course introduce these stimuli always, literally, like we can plant the tree so that the light comes through the tree, but we can also simulate it with man-made design to similar effects. Then it's about dynamic and diffuse lighting. So probably many of you have already heard about circadian lighting, where we are trying to simulate how light outside, sunlight, changes throughout the day as it changes the angle from which it shines, as it changes the intensity, and it changes the color, from warm light to cold light to warm light again. And this has been shown to be very beneficial for regulating the energy levels during the day and the quality of our sleep. And biophilic design is also working with that. We also know in general that ambient lighting, where we don't see the source, but where it's reflected, has a more kind of calming properties. So there's a set of knowledge about light also in biophilic design. Then it's about biomorphic forms and fractals. So in general, one of the most reliably confirmed facts from psychology of architecture or design is that people and people's brains, even there were MRI studies, react much better to curves in comparison to sharp angles and angular forms in general. And you can see that also how we can apply it in design, because anytime you can choose between doing something angular and curved, then you should mostly choose the curved form. There were even these, as I mentioned, MRI studies where different brain centers were activated when people were faced with angular and curved objects, where angular objects had the higher probability of activating amygdala, the brain center which is associated with the reaction of fear, while curved forms had rather a tendency to activate centers related to positive emotions, and people were more probable to approach and want to be in the presence of such objects. So again, every time you design an environment where decreasing stress is a priority, using curves is a very good one. The same goes, as I mentioned, for fractal geometry. So this is where the same pattern is repeating on multiple levels of scale. So we have the big pattern, then it splits into the smaller patterns and the smaller patterns, but it's always the same pattern, just as if you were looking at a branch of the tree where you have the big branch, then it has smaller branches and smaller branches and so on. This is very frequent geometric pattern in nature. Then there are natural materials. As I mentioned, there's a lot of research about the positive effects of wood. There was, I think, last year, a study from Stanford where they made people perform a cognitively demanding task at a computer behind a wooden desk or in a room with wooden furniture. And they compared that to the same people doing tasks in a room with white furniture. and they actually measured both on the subjective and the objective level. So both people were saying that they were less stressed, but they also measured their body through sensors, and also skin conductance sensors, where basically when you're more stressed, the more your hands are sweating, basically. And they also measured that the body's stress response was lower in the room with the wooden furniture. And of course, there are many other natural materials. It's important that they have this quality of roughness, of high level of detail, of irregularity, and these fractal patterns, as we can also see on wood. But also many types of stone can have this quality, or cork, and so on. Yeah, and there can also be man-made materials like the old-time traditional brick, the small kind of brick, which can replicate the very similar characteristics of natural materials. And then we have two patterns from the last category, which are more about the organization of space. The first one is prospect, and there are two of them which are kind of an opposite of each other. There's prospect and refuge. And prospect is about creating spaces which we have very, again, evolutionarily intuitive relationship to, because prospect and having kind of a view, usually from an elevated place, elevated platform, gives us an advantage to survival, because we can see where there might be some predators, where there might be some, for example, water that can help us. It basically gives us a good view of the situation. And we can create prospect through creating an open space, like an open staircase that people can climb on and sit on, creating some bridges, open staircases, platforms, mezzanines, basically, lookout towers, for example, anywhere where people can kind of climb up and see what's around them. And then the refuge is the opposite of that. The refuge is creating a protected space, which usually features higher privacy, has a lower ceiling. There are barriers around us which protect us. Even such a thing as this chair on the lower left image, which has kind of a high back chair, can be considered a small refuge, because we are already more protected in that chair as if we were sitting in a chair with low back or no back. Or we can even create many different elements. On the upper right, it's a picture from a school, I think in Denmark, where children can take the open route through the corridor, or even this like closed refuge space which goes throughout the furniture here. There's one example that I like very much of a building which has implemented many of these biophilic design patterns. It's Maggie's Center in Leeds in Great Britain, and it's a center for people with cancer, where they are not treated, but it's kind of a community place where they are also receiving psychological support. And it's a beautiful place where it's modern at the same time, but very biophilic. You can see that it uses, we will probably spot many of the elements like curves, natural materials like wood, a lot of plants, ambient lighting. Even you can see curves here on the railing, which kind of gently curves along the way. There are many kind of soft textures, soft furniture with natural fibers. And yeah, this is a very nice example that I like to use of how biophilic spaces can create a very pleasant environment. And remember, biophilic design it doesn't have to be expensive. Like, it's more about following these patterns or some choice of patterns that we prioritize in a given project. And it can be as simple as included a lot of plants, or bringing some wood into the space. And if we cannot afford real wood, then even a wooden surface, wooden decor can have a similar effect. It will not have all the effects, because it will maybe not be so authentic to touch. Maybe it will not smell so as real wood, but still our brain will receive the visual stimuli, which by itself, as we mentioned, with the pictures of nature, still can have positive effects. So it's very nice to implement these patterns of biophilic design in any project that we are creating where well-being of people is a priority. And I would just like to end with this quote from Sarah Williams Goldhagen, an architectural theorist. She was teaching at Harvard Design School, and she told us in an interview that there's no such thing as a neutral space. Basically, any space that you are designing will have a certain effect on people's minds, psychology, behavior, and so on. And it's very good to use these science-informed and empathetic, approach. You cannot have only one of them. It needs to be empathy. So empathy and understanding of the people who are going to use the space and the scientific evidence behind it to knowingly or to consciously make decisions in design so that you increase the probability that the design will improve people's lives, also on the psychological level. Thank you.
Wow, thank you. That was a really nice ride through nature inside. I would like to take two very practical questions that I saw rising in the chat. One was the name and the place of this last Many Center, so the Cancer Institute.
It's called Maggie's. I can put it in the chat, actually. I think that will be most practical. It's called Maggie's Center in Leeds in United Kingdom.
So they are created all over the world as super good places indeed where cancer play. I know one in Amsterdam as well with the same kind of features. So I think the organization is who is behind it is really steering the architects also in. It's really nice. There's also a question in the chat. Can you recommend any academic programs in Europe? Is there very specific ones?
There are multiple. I think I did a short video on that. If you go to my LinkedIn or Instagram, there's this video which has this thumbnail called "Where to Study." But basically, there is one program in Venice, which is a master's program specifically targeted towards architects who did bachelor's or master's in architects, and they want to develop in applying neuroscience and psychology in their work. So there's this one. There's one at the University of Surrey in the UK. It's environmental psychology, which might also have, because environmental psychology, which is like the official name for this field, it has kind of two parts. The first one is architectural psychology, which I'm working in, and the other one is eco-psychology, which is more about sustainability and sustainable behaviors and the psychology of sustainability. So at this environmental psychology program, there might be also this eco-psychology included, but there's one at the university in Surrey, and then there are some programs in the US. But I think there might be a program in Germany. If you look up this video, there's like a full or a more extended list of them. It's just my name on LinkedIn or on Instagram.
Yes, that's probably the same with the question about some more of the research and the 14 principles that you just mentioned. If you could also maybe put in the chat, or indeed people can find it in your profile probably.
Okay, I will put it there when we finish the discussion, so that I'm not taking the time. There's also one question about can biophilic features help focus. I can see. So yeah, focus in offices is one of my favorite topics, but it's kind of a different topic a little bit. But biophilic features are one of what I consider 6 most important qualities of a good focus space. So they seem to be able to, put us in a more relaxed state, but at the same time improve our thinking, our cognitive capacities. So while for focus, the most important qualities would be visual and acoustic privacy, just not being distracted, biophilic design can help to make the space more comfortable and to spend our time there and to be willing to focus and perform cognitively. So yeah, I would consider it like one of the important features.
Then one about the level of urban planning in post-war reconstruction of Ukraine, new areas for vulnerable groups of the population. And indeed, I think you worked on that as well, because you did work on district level.
Yeah, so biophilic design in the same way can be applied to the urban spaces level. I think on the urban planning level, the very much high level stuff, there I'm not sure, because we are talking about how the streets should be organized and connected and so on. But once we go to the level of the urban design, so actually deciding what is on the street, what is the facade of the building, how does it look like, what geometry, colors, patterns are used there, when we are deciding about what material the benches will be made of, where there will be greenery. These are all decisions that we can very well make with the help of biophilic design. So on the urban design level, or even the kind of big architectural level, like architectural facades, there still biophilic design can be very relevant.
Yeah. We have a question of examples of fake wood, pictures of nature that are not real. So where threshold? When does it become too cheap or too simple? Let's say, and it doesn't work anymore because you maybe sense it's fake.
I think there are maybe two ways to look at it, or two aspects to that. The first one is what stimuli our brain receives, because a lot of these effects happen on the unconscious level. Like, we are not deciding to be more relaxed because there's wood, but our brain is kind of subconsciously perceiving this wood. It's signaling that it's in a familiar environment. When I simplify that, and so it affects our body, like our stress response. And then, of course, we have the more subjective response to the environment when we look at the table and it feels cheap. So we need to balance that. Ideally, you want to have a table which doesn't feel cheap and which is wooden. But we also need to, I think, distinguish the level to which people have this reaction, even if they are not architects or designers, right? So there's, I think, a very different level of resolution when you're a designer or an architect. You can tell very easily whether it's fake wood or whether the table is cheap. But for an average person, and I'm not saying this is exact, like you need to make the judgment, but for an average person, they might still benefit more from the table being wooden decor, even if that it was cheap, but maybe to them they will still benefit from it. So this is more, I think, a decision for designers. But in general, the principle is that if you decide to go for wooden surface, like a wooden visual stimuli, then it has a higher chance of putting people at ease and reducing their stress if you put them behind a white table. Yeah. But you need to balance it also with taste and aesthetics in a way.
And one question might be a difficult one. What kind of clients are there? Is that mostly public or private clients? Or in health?
So who are my clients?
Yeah.
So I work with different kinds of clients. Some of them are real estate development companies. So when they are building, for example, an apartment house, and they know that it should be targeted towards, for example, families with children or seniors, they task me with helping them better understand what are the needs of those people, whether they are unique needs of seniors or children, or what are the general needs, as we saw with biophilic design, because this is what applies to basically everyone, and then to give them some guidance as toward, what they should build, how should the facade of the building look like, what elements should they put in the public space between the buildings, to make these kind of design choices based on research of the specific groups, but also on the general scientific knowledge that exists. Then I'm working with people, with organizations who are, for example, moving to new offices, to help them kind of tailor it to the needs of the organization, of the people working there. I'm working with architects. So I already participated on some architectural competitions, for example, where I helped them to refine their concept to be more geared towards well-being and to kind of meet these principles. Or I helped to prepare briefs for competitions. So there's a lot of different cases, but basically anywhere where you are creating a space, and the space is for people, and the space has a certain goal of supporting, learning, productivity, healing, community, and so on. Anytime there's a goal with the space, which most often there is, then I can participate in the project and help guide the decisions that are being made based on evidence and research and understanding the user groups. Yeah.
Thank you. Fascinating how far back our brain goes to the time when we were actually still living in nature. I think it's really fascinating. Maybe there will be some questions in the end. Let's first go to Gala's presentation. Gala Korniyenko, she's director of research and development of the National Youth Advocate Program and lecturer in urban planning and public policy at Ohio State University. Further, a Fulbright Fellow and researcher of inclusive participation formats and just urban solutions. Gala, I think your specialty is on people with autism, mostly research done on that one, but it's broader than that. So digging like deeper into a specialization, but on the same subject. So I'm very curious for your talk. I will do the screen share, we decided, so I will try to start that one and give you the floor.
Дякую за запрошення. Thank you so much for inviting me. It's a pleasure and honor to be here. I will start with definitions first. What is neurodiversity and how is it different from cognitive disability? So neurodiversity is the concept that differences in brain function are normal variation, while cognitive disability refers to condition that impairs cognitive function, often leading to significant challenges. For example, autism, ADHD, dyslexia, and dyspraxia are commonly associated with neurodiversity. And disability connection, not all neurodivergent people experience a disability. A neurodivergent individual might not have disability, or their disability may be a result of society that is not structured to accommodate their differences, rather than inherent deficit. And this is a social model of disability. Intellectual disability, which can be caused by conditions like Down syndrome, is a form of cognitive disability. So today I will focus on partially results of my dissertation research, my current work with autism organization here in Columbus, Ohio, and then show you the applicability of our research in practical area. So a little bit about background. So how did it start?
Can you see the screen well?
Yeah. So you can move to another slide. Okay. So how did it start?
Lilet, it doesn't change.
In 2012, while living in Ukraine, I watched the Temple Grandin biopic for the first time and was deeply inspired by her story, the story of a woman with autism. Fast forward, 2017, I was invited by Professor Kyle Ezel to co-lead a studio on autism at the Ohio State University, and together we traveled to Vanderbilt University to meet Dr. Grandin in person and share our students' autism planning and design guidelines at the Envisioning the Future for Human Technology Partnership Conference. Next slide. Based on advocacy and equity planning, the main focus is working with the community. Equity in planning means expanding opportunities to all members of the community and building local capacity to respond to current concerns moving forward. Policy Link defines equity as just and fair inclusion into a society in which all can participate, prosper, and reach their full potential, unlocking the promise of the nation by unleashing the promise in us all. Unlike equality, which connotates sameness, equity is responsive to differences. Equitable policies actively mitigate the disproportional harm faced by certain communities. On this photo, you can see, or I can describe it, image description. There are several people who are participating in charrette, which is planning public participation event. These participants are autistic adults who participated in our studio in 2017. Next slide. Based on that research, we came up with 6 feeling frameworks. Image description. 6 icons, each represents feeling that was developed during Autism Planning Studio. Feeling connected means that public event venue is easily reached, entered, and leads to destinations. The participant feels connected, included in participation process. Feeling free means that public event venue offers relative autonomy and desired spectrum of independence. The participants feel free to safe to express opinion on the subjects they are not technical experts in. Feeling clear, the public event venue makes sense and is not confusing. The guidelines of public participation are disseminated before the event and inaccessible to a level of understanding form with the principle of universal design in mind. Feeling private, the public venue offers boundaries and provides retreat. The participants are aware of individual level of accommodation available for them, and each participant recognizes that the event consists of other people with different level of feeling of private space. Feeling safe, public event venue diminish the risk of being injured or threatened. And feeling calm, the public event venue mitigates physical sensory issues associated with autism, providing modifiable light, sound, material environment. Next slide. Photo description page with a group of undergraduate students standing in front of the wall with posters that later were included into Autism Design Guidebook. Next slide. The main questions of my research was, what makes adults with autism feel welcomed and included in public events? And what accommodations planners consider for public participation with neurodiverse population? Next. The data collection for my research included survey of autistic adults, autism source database, disability listserv, autism parents and professionals, autistic adults, and social media, and interview of 31 practicing planners via American Plan Association and personal contacts. Next. Image description of this slide. Map of the United States that has circles on it showing the geographical representation of survey respondents. 6,336 emails with link to the survey were sent to organizations that work with autistic adults and children in all states and territories of the United States. Emails were pulled from National Database of Autistic Organizations. Image description circle showing the demographic representation of survey respondents. Next slide. Image description. Participation in decision-making process is the least kind of event autistic adults participate. So it's making adult events less childlike. So disability events. Next slide. Feeling connected and safe was selected as crucial for autistic adults for participation. Connected, 63% agree, strongly agree, and safe, 67%. For the question, what are some ways that could help you feel more connected during public event? Responses included comments related to format and communication and content, multiple ways to communicate, small group of people, less ableism in event planning, low sensory spaces away from crowds, specific meet-up points for others with autism or disabilities to gather within the event, quiet features with the event that could integrate neurotypicals and neurodivergent, feel safe, includes certain particular accommodations. The question above should also include an option for too connected. Connection can be tiring. Next slide. Image description. A wheel with survey results for the question, what are the needs for accommodation at the public event? Most replies, 20%, are the participants familiar with someone like me. And these are citations from the survey results, where the others are aware that autistic people will be in attendance, so they won't be mean to me. Indifference to differences. At disability events, people make me feel like I belong. Next slide. Image description. A wheel with survey results for the question, what are the most important factors that impact your decision to participate? Majority of respondents would participate in the future if the topic interests them personally, 74%, or concern broader autistic community, 60%. No requirements for participation, moderate level of participation, and not being judged, and smaller, quieter public events in the text applies. Next slide. Image description, the table with answers to the question, what experiences make you feel unwelcome, welcome during public event? Majority of occurrences is need for quiet space and reduction of noise. Next slide. Image description, woman with the cat has noise reduction headphones on her head. The question, what experience made you feel unwelcome during public event? A lot of places had issues with my noise reduction headphones, would try to hurry my verbal communication or talk over me when I was having difficulties communicating. Frequent transitions, changes, contradictory multi-step verbal instructions without written backup, not following agenda, the lack of structure and difficulty predicting what the event will be like before attending. These replies refer to feeling clear and free. Next slide. Image description, bird view of the neighborhood with houses and streets. Results of the interview with American planners, these are selected. Part of the public process is the given taken meetings in the dialogue and meetings, and it's all is not controlled. And many times there are different points of view and confusion in the meetings and loud voices, and that's not particularly helpful for autistic people. Thinking about the city planning process through the lens of person on the spectrum will help us manage that aspect, because one of the reasons that good plans don't get executed or good prescriptions, recommendations don't get taken on is because of fear of unknown change. Next slide. Some planners replied they do not specifically, I think it's next slide. Oh, okay. No, before. Sorry. Some planners reply that they do not specifically reach out to people with disabilities to participate. We don't specifically reach out to people to be like, we want someone with disability to participate, because people with disabilities fall under a bunch of other categories. It doesn't like define them as a person. We would only really do it for organization because we don't really have a way to be like, there is a list of everybody with disability. Instead, we try to focus on capturing people in the other activities they do or other type organizations they're involved with. Can you go back, Lilette? No, it's forward, back, back, back. No, this is forward. Before recommendations. Yeah. We actually don't often collect demographic. It's very difficult to collect demographic data in a comprehensive way in a process like this without being kind of invasive. So that's the other thing. And yeah, I think more often than not, we just don't ask. And so we don't actually know if we have good concept of how many with autism, participate. 17th slide. This is the summary of barriers and accommodations. Barriers include text information overload, unclear guidelines, jargon, big town hall virtual meetings, heated discussion, confusing multiple platforms without prior testing and training. And accommodations to those include more images than text, getting materials in advance, bullet points with highlighted summary, closed captioning, automated transcripts, clear algorithm to action, plan, plain English or Spanish, focus groups, interviews, participating in their own pace and terms, training how to participate, multiple ways to participate, online and offline. Next. The main recommendation from survey autistic adults and planners are creating opportunities for broader and meaningful inclusion, breaking through misconceptions about autism, avoidance as trauma response, sensitivity, sensory overload, being proactive in providing accommodations, providing physical accommodations for possible sensory and information overload. For example, limiting number of participants during engagement. Social accommodation, awareness about autistic culture, disability etiquette, understanding peculiarities of neurological sensory perception. Establishing partnership with neurodiverse communities, self-advocates, and disability organizations. Making participation in the planning process relevant to the needs of neurodiverse communities. Next slide. Current projects, how is it going? Image description. Students in the camps of all-inclusive living. Next slide. Photo description. Page with a group of undergraduate students standing in front of the wall. No, this is the accessibility audit. And students are doing accessibility audit for our work on the studio. Next slide. This is an example of how we could apply six feeling framework for inclusive landscape. Next slide. Feeling connected. So here you see the Kyle, cannot read this, park as a central gathering place for Dallas residents and visitors. And this is demonstrate feeling connected. So this park creates urban green space over existing Woodland Rogers Freeway between Pearl and Pole Street in downtown Dallas. The park includes performance stage, restaurant, dog park, children park, great lawn, water features, Texas native garden, shaded parking path, an area of games, much more. So the park is designed as a series of outdoor rooms that are continuously changing and fascinating for visitors. All these places are connected. Next. Next slide. This is Brooklyn Bridge Park design. So it's also highlighting the feeling connected. Transforms a derelict industrial waterfront into cohesive parkland with distinct yet linked zone. It achieves connectivity by creating continuous waterfront promenade, using rolling hills and berms to create seamless flow between areas, linking the park disparate former piers. The design also connects the community to the natural environment and its history by reestablishing the shoreline and reusing found materials. It's Brooklyn, New York. Feeling free. Amenities include innovative children playground among the array of active and passive spaces. Color material palette is simple, using combination of cordon steel, granite, and stainless steel. Hinge Park is for all ages and provides water play. Okay, next. Playful custom seatings from swivel chairs to oversized loungers and giant cleats, nod to the shipbuilding industry that previously occupied the site. Next one. 606 is linear park, and this is feeling clear. Trail built on a mass concrete and infill structure of a former elevated rail line. After the railway was decommissioned, neighborhood groups created informal trail that became basis of the park. The 606 high degree of accessibility magnifies its impact. Now gives 80,000 residents, including 20,000 children, public green space, less than a 10-minute walk from home. Next. Most of the elevated structures is 30 feet wide, but it occasionally broadens to as much as 60 feet. To comfortably accommodate bikers, pedestrians traveling in both directions. The MVVA team made the trail itself 14 feet wide, like passing lanes on highways. High-speed bicycle lanes are located along the median, with making walking path on the outside edges of the trail. Next. This is feeling private. An example is Novartis Square and Pavilion, designed by Good Form Studio, led by Associate Professor of Architecture Andrew Cruz and Professor of Landscape Architecture Dorothy Imbert of Knowlton School. The Square and Pavilion project similarly merges architectural and landscape interventions to create a new type of workplace for Novartis employees on the Basel, Switzerland campus. To the south, a wide wood boardwalk links the western part of campus to Rhine River to the east and offers viewing platform for circular garden room beyond. These rooms are defined by tall, clipped hornbeam hedges and alternate with dense masses of yields to create layered composition. As you look at the hedge rooms from outside, the overlap between the individual form create perceptual ambiguity and suggest a deeper space. Spaces inside the hedge rooms create sense of enclosure or privacy. Furnished with chairs and tables, they can use small groups for informal meetings. Next one. You could see inside space of hedge rooms provide type of comfort you wouldn't typically expect, whether you are inside or outside of the building. Biophilic design in a way. Photos of pathway near Parish Art Museum surrounded by cultural landscape. This is feeling safe. Sheep meadow, wetlands, scrubs, woodland. Parish Art Museum, landscape designed by Reed Hildenbrand Landscape Architecture, covers 14 acres and works the region's agricultural heritage. The use of native plants, rain gardens, other green infrastructure elements was a priority to minimize the environmental impact and conserve resources. This design was intended to create cohesive experience between the building and its surrounding. This museum includes parking on the back edge of the property, defined by a clear hedgerow that creates this feeling of safety. Next slide. A photo of mothers walking with their sons on a pathway surrounded by trees, protected lanes, as you see. Next one. Design features key to the park success here. It's Brooklyn Bridge Park by MVV. Include massive sound deflecting landform, sheltering the site from highway noise, reuse of found materials, everything from furniture to stone terraces, so it's feeling calm through landscape architecture. Thriving and diverse ecologies, nature-based play, and other innovative play spaces. Exceptional range of active recreational programs and self-sustaining economic model that has become new standard for ambitious public space project. On the right, diagram of how MVVA transformed the noisy and impressive east edge of the site into lushly planted landform, a feat of engineering that doubles as a beloved landscape setting, and sound berms significantly reduce noise generated by multi-layered Brooklyn-Queens Expressway. Next slide. This slide contains a photo of Prairie Line Trail in Tacoma, Washington. The Prairie Line Trail in Tacoma, Washington is 1 mile paved multi-use urban trail that covers historic railroad corridor into linear park. It connects waterfront, downtown, University and Brewery District, and features public art, historical interpretation, green spaces, and this is Place Studio Design and Company. The design on the right corner shows how bricks are laid to minimize the edge between, which provide tighter join and reduce vibrations. Next one. And this is current work that I am involved in, a photo description page, screenshot with website that describes web accessibility maturity model, and provides link to learn more about accessibility. This is work in progress, and we are filling it. And you have the website address, tally.org and accessiblecommunity.org. And the last slide, resources based on the work in the field of planning and landscape architecture for those who want to learn more. Sorry that I was so fast because I was afraid we will not have time. So if you have any questions, I think I replied to one of the questions in Q&A already.
I'll purposely keep it a little bit longer so that people can copy it or make photos, but it would be nice indeed to have those links maybe also in the chat, or later we can share them on the YouTube channel when we publish it, so that you can get it. So really nice, because indeed you were really looking at the larger scale, the outside, where Michael was focusing a lot on buildings on the inside. So I think it was a very nice combination, and I even saw I think some of the principles that Michael was also mentioning reflected in what you were showing. So I think a really nice combi of the two. Let's indeed see if there are more questions in the Q&A. There are a few. Yeah, you answered a few of them already in the chat, no? Let's take one out.
In chat here, the links will be people able to see that?
Yeah. So there was a question, curiosity, where you continue to explore this topic and how much room there is for deeper research in the fields that you have been talking about. You already were telling on your current research, but what direction do you think you will take next?
So going back to what Michael was talking about subjectivity, and when you talk about feelings and perception, they are very individual. Another next level could be, and people already doing in architecture, is using biometric measurements. For example, one of the researchers I was in contact with used special glasses, and you probably heard and saw that kind of research done. Measuring the pupil dilation and the area that you are looking at, and kind of combining subjective feelings with metrics, make it more objective. So that's one of the ways that you can do it. Another way is actual implementation. And this is what we are working now in the studio this semester. We took those guidelines, we took all of this work that we were doing from 2017, and now applying it in actual development. So including people with autism, different disabilities, in assessment of the site, for example. As you know, and you probably heard a lot about planning, like we have great plans, we can have great designs, but if there is no a specific plan of implementation, putting it in action. It's just a vision exercise. It's just a plan that's on the shelf.
Yes. Unfortunately, it often happens. Michael, are you still with us? I see your image gone.
Yeah, I'm here.
Yeah, okay. Your camera is off. Because I was thinking, is there your research has been on also on the specific aspects of neurodiverse people, or was it really on, let's say, the average citizens, or how do you make did you make distinction or specific target groups in your research?
Do you mean on biophilic design or in general?
Biophilic design. Yeah.
I think biophilic design is mostly design that is good for mostly everyone. So it's a universal framework that we can use whenever we design for people. And there are some potential benefits for neurodiverse people that I highlighted, where it's a case of, it benefits everyone, for example, by reducing stress, but neurodiverse people often need the stress reduction even more than an average person, or the benefits in recharging and supporting attention. That is, again, something that will benefit a neurotypical person, but people with ADHD even more. So here I would see the overlap and how biophilic design is relevant to that, but it's not specifically only something that is applicable to neurodiverse people.
Yeah. The question which says inclusive in its optima forma. I like the link with feelings a lot. Many beautiful examples in public space that are much more inclusive. What kind of spaces in Ukraine should be prioritized in your opinion? I think that's mainly to Gala, the question.
So I can say that I have been heard about Безбар'єрна Україна, Ukraine without barriers, from maybe like 2010, 11, 12. Before I came to United States, we were doing some activities in my hometown, Cherkasy, with disability activists, including deputies. So it was prior to war. And we are still, not there yet. It's hard to have 100% accessibility for all different disabilities. But I think now we are in that need even more than before war because of a lot of injured veterans and civilian population. And I think this research that we showed in autism can be relevant to accommodations and what Michael was talking about, biophilic design, because I think with war, majority of Ukrainian population is now traumatized, and it has to be addressed, and all of those spaces should be created. In Soviet times, we had sanatoriums, this kind of concept where people would go and spend time in nature. After Soviet Union collapsed, a lot of places have been privatized. So I think that's one of the ways to address the issues of accessibility of those restorative spaces in Ukraine.
Do you see, do you receive from Ukraine already questions on these specific kind of designs? Is that reaching you, let's say, these questions?
Yes, like through Rosquit, for example, through Fulco and some of the projects they are doing. I can attest to you that autism planning and design is not common in the United States, even though a lot of resources are here. That's why we got planning award in 2019 with our project, because it was something new. So now, because we have better diagnostics, people are more aware, there will be more need for this kind of designs and approaches that focus also on feelings and level of comfort people feel in the spaces. I could say that in Australia, there are some institutions that focus on that, and they like share our findings, and it's get more and more traction and will be more, I think, on agenda in other countries, not only in Ukraine.
Looking around, am I missing questions? To open questions. There was one still for Michael, if still possible. Of course, it is. It's a story, basically. I will read it. When I first heard about biophilic design, I immediately thought about a deeper aspect, because I don't believe, for example, that if you design a space and put a potted plant in it, or create a view of a lawn through a window, or use wooden panels, the space automatically becomes biophilic. Let's be honest, when we erect a building or reconstruct something, we are already outside of biophilia. It looks like this is attaching a little bit to the question that was asked before, like when does it become cheap or fake? So he or she says, what I'm more interested in is the designer being sincere in the response to the request, answering the current settings, that they treat people's needs with respect. What do you think about that? Even if a design or a house would be entirely out of concrete, if it was made with these kind of aspects. I am curious by your answer, because on the one hand you were saying like it's an unconscious thing that people react on certain materials, and yeah, interesting question. So please.
So I'm not sure if I understood fully the thought yet without like thinking more about it. But it seems to me like there are maybe two topics to address. The first topic is whether the design is, in alignment with the natural environment as such, right? Which would more reach, I think, into the topic of sustainability, into supporting biodiversity, just being like a responsible part of the ecosystem in which it resides, right? But then what I see as biophilic design is more about looking at it from the point of view of the human body and what is the effect on human body and human brain. So that's at least my point of view as a psychologist, right? And I do believe that if a project is to be deemed universally high quality or good, then it needs to be a responsible part of its ecosystem, and in this way, connected to nature, and biophilic in a way that it creates an environment that is familiar to our brains. So I think those are like two points of view that have to be combined. I often get, because this is maybe why I understood the question this way, because I often get the question from people who are who mean to ask about the sustainability aspect, and maybe when I talk why I don't mention sustainability more. Well, it's just because there are experts who are already experts on sustainability, and I focus on this human aspect, and I'm very happy to work on projects together with people who are focusing on this aspect of sustainability and ecosystems and so on. But I bring kind of this specific point of view, I would say.
Yeah, I think this question brings also in, like, is it really the material itself, or is it also the care that you put in your design? So the care about maybe even certain dimensions or certain combination of forms that already bring these kind of feelings without being the real material or being really cork or really so it relates to that, I think.
I think it's whatever the human mind can perceive, right? So if you build a building out of concrete, but the person never sees the concrete, but instead sees, I don't know, the facade or like something else, and you change the concrete for something very natural, but the person will not see it, then it will not influence them very much, right? Of course, there can be effects through other senses. Maybe the smell is going to be different and so on. But it's all about perception for me. Like the brain and the body, it reacts to what it can sense, perceive, feel, and so on. So, it's like, and this is, I don't know if it's a good metaphor, like example or metaphor, but it's this famous story about Apple computers where Steve Jobs wanted the computers to be beautiful on the inside, just because he was satisfied by the fact that even though no one will see it almost ever, that it's beautiful on the inside. But I would argue that it's similar with, I guess, biophilic design. Like it's about what people perceive. And it's good if the designer is satisfied by making it, so to say, beautiful on the inside through the use of the materials, even then, though maybe people will not see the building material. But from the point of view of the person, it's really about what affects them.
Yeah. I see it's exactly our time that we were planning to talk, and I think there's a lot more to be said about this. I think there was the amount of people that showed interest was a sign of a very important topic for Ukraine at the moment. Indeed, it will be on our YouTube channel that can be seen via Roskvit, and then just click on YouTube and you get into the lectures series. So that will be on from in 2 days, I guess, when they've put it up. Thank you both again so much for your time and all your insights. Maybe we get back to you with some questions also for our knowledge platform. And indeed, Gala, we know how to find you in specific design issues. And I think, Michael, if you're open for that, the same to you.
Sure.
So thank you so much. Wishing everybody a wonderful night. Olena, thank you again for your wonderful translation work, and hope to see you all next time.
Дякую, до побачення.
Thank you. See you. Bye.
Bye-bye.